I'm Doug, and on behalf of everyone at Eminence, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first video in a series on Eminence IRs. This time around, we're going to be taking 6 style-driven progressions utilizing tones like you heard at the top of the video, as well as high gain tones and stuff in between. And mapping them to 6 of the most popular modelers on the market. Future videos are going to focus on the individual modelers and or their families, as well as how to get these IRs on those devices. It's also going to be a video on utilizing amps, reactive load boxes, and plugins. All right, a little bit of housekeeping before we get to the demos. First and foremost, all the content in this video has been organized into chapters. Links are down below so you can get to the exact content you're interested in. At the very end, there's a chapter called Tips and Tricks where I offer some insights of how you can go from looking at a folder filled with all these different IRs and mic options, which is kind of option overload for most of us the first time we look at a folder like that, to like inside there is the perfect speaker that's going to match the guitar, setup, and part that I'm trying to craft in the arrangement that I'm utilizing in it. All right, so here's the other thing. The majority of the IRs on the Eminence-Digital website were shot by Michael Britt, well known for his guitar work in the chart-topping band Lone Star, as well as his Kemper profiles. And his approach was utilizing a switchback cabinet from Third Power, which basically is a cabinet that has very little standing waves because of the way it's designed. So you have very little influence of the cabinet on the speakers. And in turn, he mic'd that up with a combination of, or your choice of, I should say, SM57 on and off axis, Royer 101, Sennheiser 421, Sennheiser 906, as well as a Neumann U87, and of course a combination of the SM57 and the Royer 101, which is my personal fave, and that's what I use for all the demos of his IRs in this video. I'll talk about why again in the tips and tricks section. Great sounding IRs, and basically those are available for all the speakers in the Eminence line. You can get IRs for individual speakers and packs. And speaking of packs, there's the Christian Cole Metal IR pack, which is awesome for way more than metal, as you'll hear in the demos. As a matter of fact, in all the demo sets, the 4th demo will always be one of Christian's IRs. And his approach was very different than a lot of the approaches that people take when shooting IRs. He basically took a Mesa Boogie slant recto cabinet from the early 90s. Those are great sounding cabinets. And basically he chose which mics and which speakers individually or in combination. By the way, his pack features the DV77, CV75, and the Swamp Thing. And he basically chooses what you're going to get and then gives labels like fat or bite. And you can look at the name of the IR and kind of go, that's going to be perfect for what I'm trying to do. And in combination with what Michael did, you've got 2 great approaches for getting the sound that's right for your guitar, setup, and part. All the IRs are available at 44.1, 48, and 96K, so you can get them into your favorite devices. With that said, let's get to the demos. So we're going to kick things off with some clean tones on the HeadRush MX5. And this is the same sound you heard at the top of the video, which is a 1964 Vibreverb model and some Hall reverb. One of the other things I love to do with IRs is kind of use them like glue in the mix, especially when you're using the same tone for your rhythms and your leads, but maybe with a subtle adjustment like I'm doing here. I've got 2 rhythm guitar parts panned left and right using the exact same guitar and setup. Then for the melody / lead track, I've just got 1 track, dead center. I've added a little bit of gain and some delay and reverb and pulled the treble back. But because I'm using the same IR and the same basic amp sound, it really sits really nicely together the way the parts blend together and in turn the way they sit in the mix. my favorite things about the Eminence speaker line is there's a huge amount of variety. And even when you find speakers that are great for a common style, there's nuance to each of them, which means for me as a player, I approach the parts just a little bit differently depending on the speaker. And the same thing is true for the IRs. One of the biggest quote-unquote mistakes guitar players make with IRs is they have a tendency to use one IR from the beginning to the end of the track without ever thinking about the idea of like, hey, maybe I'll change it up for the different sections of the song. And in this demo set in particular, you can really hear the nuanced difference between the different IRs. So as you're listening to them, I'd like you to do so, think about how you could use IRs to kind of better embellish your arrangements. For this demo set, all 4 IRs come from the Christian Cole Metal IR pack because I'm playing my Petrucci 7-string. So here's the thing. The first 3 demos are variations on the 3 speakers that are included in that pack, and then the 4th IR is all 3 speakers together. From George Harrison to Richard Fortus, Gretsch guitars are magic, especially the way they sit in a track. For this particular one, I'm doing very little variation with the right hand, but you can hear how much the IR is making a difference in terms of how it reproduces the harmonic content of the instrument. Welcome to the IR tips and tricks section. First of all, thanks for watching this video, getting all the way through here. If you click directly to this section, awesome. All right, we're going to make this as efficient as we possibly can, but the goal is to make your experience with IRs as musical as possible. All right, at the top of the list, option overload versus tone fests. The first time you open up a folder of IRs, especially with a bunch of mic choices, it's mind-numbing. And honestly, that's how I started this project. The great folks over at Eminence said, here's all of the IRs. And you open it up and it's just like all these files. The 24, 48, 96K business, it's kind of device dependent. And most of the directions are good. Some of them are great. And some of them are terrible about how to get them on to these different devices. So that's why we're going to cover that in the future videos. And then we'll also kind of do the same thing with the reactive load boxes and so on and so forth. All right. So the whole thing, the option overload versus tone fest, if you can see each one of those files as another speaker cabinet with another speaker with a different microphone in front of it, you're like, yeah. So then once you've kind of wrapped that kind of option overload into like, oh, this is great, this is a tone fest, where do you begin? So that gets us to kind of picking some obvious starting places. So I'm going to make some suggestions. You may have noticed that there were 3 speakers that I went to a lot. The CV75, the GASC64, and the Governor. And if you take a look down below there, you're going to see the frequency response charts. And you're going to see the first 2 are really, really close. And you'll see that if you kind of overlaid them over one another and you added a little tiny bit of a bump right around 2K, that's where the Governor comes in. So there's a certain thing that I like. So there's a bunch of great information at eminence-digital.com for you to kind of peruse and get to know these guys. All right, so those 3 are great places to start. They work for a wide range of styles and instruments, and I use them a lot. Okay, now once you download them, you've got this giant folder filled with different microphones, some of which you may or may not be familiar with. So I would suggest taking a guitar that you love, a rig and a sound that you love, and just go through one of the IRs and the different microphones and get familiar with them. And that way you kind of begin to go, okay, if I understand the nuance that separates a 57 on axis and off axis, or my personal favorite, the combination of a Royer, either a 101 in this case, or a 121 in combination with an SM57, the reason I like that is it generally sounds the most like the speaker than the other microphones. You can think of a microphone as a filter. It's not going to sound or feel like the speaker in the room. It's going to sound and feel like the speaker in a room with a microphone in front of it. And the microphone combination that for me sounds most like the speaker in the room is a combination of the, in this particular case, the Royer 101 and the Shure SM57. So if you're looking for a place to just start in the midst of it, start there. But I would strongly suggest once you start there, then kind of going, well, what's on the other side? What are these other things? How do they sound? And if you find a speaker that you're like, you know, for example, the Cannabis Rex is a slightly smaller sounding speaker, but it's a great sounding speaker. That's one of the places I would reach for the Neumann U87, which is kind of a fatter sounding thing. So it'll fatten it up a little bit. So your microphone choice gives you more option, which gets me to this next thing. Find your flavor, right? So again, for me, it's the Royer and the 57. For you, you may just kind of go, hey, I really like the Neumann, but just find what works. Okay, speaking of what works, another option is just Christian's pack. All of those speakers sound great. And what's really cool about them, especially if you're just kind of getting started, is names like Byte and Fat make it really easy to go, I'm looking for Byte, I'm looking for Fat, and you can use the descriptive names and not have to worry about the microphones at all. It's a huge help. All right, so here's the thing. The perfect IR for the part. And this is why it's so important to get to know the speakers and to get to know the microphones and start with one speaker and kind of work your way out. So the deal is that it's a funny thing. What you love in the room, all of a sudden you put up the other tracks and you're like, man, that doesn't sound quite like it did when there wasn't all this other information going on. And the whole point about knowing the mics and the different IRs is you'll begin to kind of go, that thing that I didn't like standing on its own was the perfect thing for the guitar in the rig in the arrangement. And again, like I mentioned earlier in the video, sometimes it's good to change IRs in the different sections of the arrangement. The other thing is that it's always nice to kind of blend IRs, put one to the left and one to the right. You can do all sorts of creative things with IRs. The sky's the limit. Sometimes you can stack them like this, knock yourself out. All right, on the website, you can look on the product pages and they're going to tell you kind of what styles each one of these IRs is good for. Each one of these is kind of like, if you think about a socket set, there's going to be a time that knowing that perfect socket is a huge help, which is why it's good once you know your microphones. Starting with a pack, Christians is a great place to start, but there are a number of different packs that you can go for. And then kind of beginning to kind of go, all right, this is the microphone that I like to start with. I know what the other mics do. Let me try these other speakers using my favorite mic combination or individual mic and kind of go, okay, this is what it does. The other thing is then begin to switch guitars, because then you kind of have this grid of understanding, just like you've got, you know, this particular 112 cabinet, this 412 cabinet. If you're like, yeah, Doppler, I know all of this stuff, that's awesome. Knock yourself out. But if you were kind of new to the IR thing, or like kind of everybody has a tendency to do, like, I just kind of keep using the same IR over and over, well, you don't play the same song over and over, and you don't play the same guitar most of the time over and over. So it's good to have the idea of, how can I use this to create a more musical experience? All right. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the rest of the videos. Again, for more information, please visit eminence-digital.com. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed to the Eminence YouTube channel, I want to invite you to do so. Don't forget to ring the bell. I just really want to say thank you for hanging out, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.